Hey Bimal, so welcome once again. There
Hi,
was
Arun.
a technical glitch, and now I've been told that it is completely resolved and we can go on with the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, welcome once again for this program, LinkedIn Live, where we are talking about inspiring and influencing your team. So, before we get into the topic, before we get into anything, I want you to let this audience, which is watching you right now live, let them know who you are, what you do, and give us a brief background about yourself.
Sure. Thank you, Arun, once again. Very brief. I am basically a biologist by education. I have over 30 years of experience of working with large Fortune 500 organizations to very, very young organizations in multiple fields. So I've been into fields like in vitro diagnostics. I've been into life sciences, healthcare. If I have to say, out of the 30 years, last 20 years of mine has been leading teams and businesses of various sizes in India and across Asia Pacific region. Kind of, if I have to summarize a little bit about myself, I love working in challenging environments. That's something that I really, really love, and it drives me. I love coaching, mentoring, and obviously don't do it for free. In return, I also learn from young and talented people. Yeah, so that's what I am.
Excellent. I'm sure that's why our synergies match, and that's why we have a lot of things in common like that. Well, taking this discussion forward, I'm sure you will agree that leadership is one of the most attracted topic to anyone and everyone. Wherever it starts, people still give their eyes and ears attention to it because it's so dynamic, it's so happening, it's so important that you cannot say that you have read something and you are a learned person. It's an ongoing. So now, when we start this, I would say that people join you in an organization looking up to your leadership. People leave also because they don't trust in your leadership, and people prosper also. It's because of leadership. So before we get into the whole conversation and taking more views, I want to know what's your leadership style and why do you think that leadership style is important?
Very interesting question. I think I really love this question because uh, if I would kind of say in a very generic manner, every individual has a style of his own, and so stands true for leadership as well. So everybody has an inherent and dominant style of leadership that an individual carries, but it's a leader basically who polishes every possible style that exists of leadership. And I think a true leader or a very effective leader is someone who basically is able to adapt his leadership style to the needs and the requirements of the situation of the organization, or what an environment actually demands from you. So if I have to basically say something about myself, I would say it's more of situational leadership. If I were to go very theoretical, I would say you can classify it anywhere between S1 or S4 styles. It hardly really matters, but it's how you adapt to situations, how you adapt your leadership styles to situations. That is what I would say is more of my leadership style.
Okay.
If I still have to kind of say a little bit more from my perspective, a true leader, few things which a leader needs to really have in himself, and that's something that I really value more, which is the first and the foremost is empathy. So in whatever style I would really be acting as a leader, I think empathy is something that would be a common denominator that I would always have. So I would say that's something that I would kind of summarize myself as a situational leader who always carries empathy in him.
Okay. That's excellent. I think you said it in one word, that is empathy, which is the most common denominator. And in my understanding and in my interaction with a lot of leaders, I've seen people who are leaders who are successful or leading big and successful organization. I think this is one of the most common ingredient. They have understood it so well that what the situation, I think this is one thing that they have been able to use it at the right time, or maybe it's a part of their DNA now, and that takes them up. So taking this topic forward, I want to understand now in your current and in your past experience put together, what are some of the strategies and some of the methods that a leader can, help in inspiring and influencing their team? And how you can kind of tailor made it with respect to a given situation for a leader? Anything that you would like to give light on that?
Yeah, I would say the most important thing that one needs to keep in mind is leadership is not really a title. It's not a title. It's neither a position that somebody gets. So I think that's the first point that one needs to have it ingrained in his mind, that it's not a position that I have. It's not a title that I have that makes me a leader. It's basically a characteristic. It's a way of being. Above all, I would say it's something which inspires an employee, it inspires an individual, engages him, drives a team towards a common goal, a mission or a purpose. I think that's the most important aspect of being an effective leader. So if as a leader you need to inspire someone, if you need to motivate someone, I think you need to really have this understanding clear in your mind. That it's not a title. It's something more than that. It's a characteristic. Secondly, I would say we need to understand we work with humans. We don't work with machines. We don't work with computers. So there's no real code that you can kind of punch in and your whole team is basically going to work in the same manner. It doesn't work that way. So every individual in your team basically is different. Situations are different. The cultures are different. You might be leading teams which are geographically different. So there's no one way in which you can inspire and motivate every individual in your organization. So it's much more complex in that sense. So from a leadership perspective, when you have to inspire someone, when you have to influence someone, a leader needs to be able to derive a common underlying sense of purpose. So there has to be a common purpose which he should be able to identify. This is the purpose for which I want to work, and that's becomes a common purpose for all your teams. As soon as you're able to do that, you're able to identify that and then pass it on to every individual in your team, which obviously needs it's much more complex than it looks like. But as soon as you're able to do that, I think that inspiration and influence by default happens. I mean, if I have to kind of give a very simple example here, I think sports is something that really is one thing that where leaders actually have to derive this. Simple example, I think we've just gone through the World Cup. Yeah. Now, if I have to quote an example, let's say, Virat Kohli is at the cusp of hitting a 50th century. And at that point of time, he probably needs to pass on the baton to someone else. He would make sure that he would pass on the baton to someone else rather than hitting a century. So, he wouldn't really focus on the century, because for him, the core purpose of the match is not his century or not his world record. It's his team winning. So a true leader is able to inspire that. And if you're able to do that, I think you are probably a very, very successful leader who can influence and inspire your team effectively.
Okay, so I get it, that the more the leader, he himself believes in the purpose, the cause, that why you are in that place in the first place, is something that your actions are gonna inspire people. They are gonna influence their character. I think that's a very, very valid and important point. And I also see that a lot of young leaders these days, I see young leaders means they are heading the companies at the age of even, early 30s or even late 20s. Yeah. And sometimes I see that in the hurry and the heat of achieving big numbers and objectives, probably, this is something that I see that they miss out. So that's my next question, in fact. And my next question is that when do you see a leader is failing to inspire or influence his or her team, and what exactly do they do? I mean, it's the other way around to ask the same question. What do they do that doesn't inspire anyone around them?
I think by theoretically we may envision an environment or an organization where a leader is always successful and absolutely successful. I, however, feel that it's very difficult to avoid a situation where leadership failure never happens in an organization. I think it is not about a leader not failing. It is about a leader being able to identify that he's reaching a situation where he's likely to fail and do a turnaround. I think that is what is true leadership. And that's more successful leadership than trying to avoid failure. I think that's probably one of the things that's going to make a leader fail more often than probably make him successful. So while we might feel most competent leaders are never fail, but it's not that. I think occasionally it still may be perceived as intemperate leader, in certain situations. So it's not about preventing failure of leadership or to influence people or inspire them. It's about identifying the early signs and take effective actions that I think it's not happening. I think there's something missing. I think I'm not able to inspire my team, and trying to understand what is it that's driving it. So how do you really understand that you're failing? There are very, very simple indicators that as a leader, you would say that I think my leadership is failing. I'm not able to influence or effectively lead my team. One of the first things that I would say a leader really is able to perceive or see is disengagement. An individual or a team, you will immediately identify that a team is getting disengaged. An individual is getting disengaged. You might end up into a situation where you will see that the team does not speak. You don't get criticism. You don't get critical feedback. You don't get creative feedback. The working of your team suddenly starts becoming monotonous. It becomes robotic. You will see more blame game happening. You see less collaborative work happening, less acceptance. You will see one team against other. If it's a large organization, you will see one function is against other function, because they're not going for the same goal. Their goal becomes superlative as compared to the goal of an organization. And that's a very clear-cut indication that there's something that's not right. My vision, my goal that I've set for the organization is not the same goal that my team probably has. So it's us against them. So I would say, rather than trying to avoid failure, is about you're always going to have graph which goes up and down, and that's true in any situation. If a leader is able to identify that there's something really wrong happening, and then take effective corrective actions at that point of time, bring the team together, understand where the challenges are, and that is what really, really defines. So I think turning around from an early stage disengagement and taking necessary corrective actions, that really makes a leader more effective to influence a team.
Excellent. I think very well said. I think I take one point from this views of yours is that I have seen, particularly with young leaders, when they move into senior and big roles, somehow I think they have the tendency that now they have all the answers to all the questions. And in the excitement of that, as you said, that they don't want to see themselves as failure, that I don't know something. So that is where, they tend to prove that. And what you said, then things starts falling together. Well, you're right. One is disengagement, very rightly said. I think that is one of the very important criteria that a leader, how he is creating programs and other activities where his direct reports and the entire team gets engaged. And you said something earlier related to the purpose. So that's my next question to you, that how leaders can create a compelling vision for the organization, and how do they articulate that vision to the team so that everyone in the team, even if it is the last man, even if it is a 10,000 employee company or a 10 employee company, how they get hooked? Can you throw some light on it?
Sure. I think that's a very, very critical point for any organization to really succeed, or a leader to succeed. And I think that's exactly what we spoke about. We have been probably speaking as well. The vision and the goal for most organizations which fails, or it's the vision and the goal which basically remains as a vision and a goal of the leader. and not of the organization or of the team. And I think that leads to significant amount of failures that we really see many times. The efficiency, the effectiveness of a leader to be able to translate the goal into a palatable and understandable language is most critical. Getting that buy-in of the vision is more important to be successful than the vision itself. How do you get that buy-in? And that's a good point. So I think if it doesn't happen, the vision becomes a great masterpiece of lovely message of words and jargons which stays on the wall of an organization. It's just a vision of a leader, great jargon. It does not really mean anything to the people. So I think the first thing from a leadership perspective is to be able to translate this into messages which could be delivered in different languages, different words, but ultimately give the same meaning and the purpose to different people. If this message is able to shift the team's response from I have to do this to I want to do this, that's a clear message that yes, I think your message has percolated down, and the goal is now not your goal, it's a goal of your team and it's a goal of the organization. So translating this into palatable language is more important. I think if it's a small team, it's much more easier. The larger the team, the more complex it gets. So it starts off with translating your goal into actionable items, which are time bound, which are measurable, which can actually be. So a larger vision is translated into smaller goals, action items, and each function. Let's say you have a large organization of 10,000 employees. Every function has to basically drive down to, let's say, a vision of making your company into the most loved company and the product, which is basically something that's going to probably change the world. Now that's a vision. How do you bring it down into smaller components? As a technology company, you basically then break it down into individual action items for each functions in your organization. You don't have to micromanage the action plan, but it's important to pull milestones and measurable deliverables for each individual and each functions. I think that is what basically becomes the crux of making your vision more palatable. Secondly, I think coming back to the same human aspect, we are still humans, we are not machines. And whether we like it or not, and something that I always use, and I always say to my colleagues, my peers, my team members, my friends is, as an individual, if I want to get things done from somebody, the other person is going to think, what is in it for me? Whether we like it or not. It's real. I mean, we have to accept the fact. So unless and until we are not able to bring down that vision or the goal into something that an individual or a team identifies, what is in it for me? What do I get out of this? It's not going to be successful. And that's what basically is important. So it's like, logic makes us think. So visions kind of makes us think. But it's the emotion which drives us to act. If you're able to convert that logic into an emotion, that's basically is going to make you act. So giving live examples, giving success stories, which has much bigger impact on individuals to go and buy into your vision. Why? What is it in it for me? If you're able to do that, how does this actually matter? Does my work really matter? I might be a person in my packing department packing. Does my work really matter? How does it impact? And that basically, bring it down to that level. My vision has to be making my company the most respected company in the world. And that basically is driven down to the lowest rung person, that the way I pack matters. And that's basically it works. And if I have to say the last thing, in a large organization, it's more difficult because a leader cannot reach everyone. And you will always have people who would love your vision, people who are not going to love your vision, whether you like it or not. It's impossible that you're going to have everybody who's going to be with you. We are not a leader of an army where when the leader says, follow me, everybody's going to follow whether you like it or not. It doesn't work in corporates and organizations. And that's where I would say you find influencers. We are in a world of social media. Influencers are probably the most effective thing that probably exists today. Every organization has positive influencers and negative influencers. So from a leadership perspective, you should be able to identify strong influencers, when you identify them, they are the ones who are going to drive your purpose down the line. You basically need to convince those influencers who then convince their team members. And that's how I would say your mission and your vision basically can easily be percolated down into the organization to the last member in the team.
Again, I'm really thrilled and impressed the way you made it look so simple, and I'm really glad that you touched upon what's in it for me, what is happening at the root level, because there are different functions, different departments. People come and do their jobs and they say that I'm doing my job, but how many of them say that I'm here for a purpose? And how important the role of leader, even in every function and every department, and finally to the top leader, that ensuring that the same blood is flowing everywhere, the same DNA is flowing everywhere, then only the organization is able to achieve the objectives. And very well said that you need to spend a lot of time in hiring the right talent so that you have the right influencers in your team who can percolate down to the last level. You can't go to the last man every day. That means you're going to be everywhere and you're going to make a mess of it. So very well said.
Yeah.
Now I want to ask you that people who are listening and watching right now, and maybe those who will watch a little later, what are some of the challenges that leaders face while they have to inspire and influence a team? And what are some of your experiential tips that you can share that how they can overcome them? Can you throw some light on this as well?
I think I would go back to something that you said when we started on the leader. Leaders basically are looked upon by the team as Superman. You said basically young people basically think they are leaders and they know everything. And so that's a perception that probably a leader develops, or that's also a perception that your team basically has, that, here's a Superman. If I have a problem, I just need to go to him and he's going to give me a solution. You're expected to have answers to all the questions. You're expected to have solutions to all the problems. You're expected to be available to any and every individual when he or she needs you. And that's unreal. I think that first you as a leader need to accept that it's not real. You are not somebody who has solutions to everything and you cannot be everywhere. So it all starts with the first statement of being real. Let me be real. I don't know everything, and you don't need to know everything. You don't need to have a solution for everything. So as soon as you as an individual or as a leader is going to assume that I have every knowledge of everything in this organization and about this market, I think that is going to be the first thing that's going to drive, that's going to be the first challenge you as a leader is going to have, that you will not be able to influence your team because you don't know everything. Otherwise, you don't need people in your team. So that's the first thing that I think is the biggest first challenge that you would have as a leader, where you cannot influence a team member or you cannot inspire a team member because you don't know everything. That's reality. Second is, and which I would say a very, very important aspect, is communication. I cannot emphasize more how much the more you communicate is the most important thing for a leader to be successful and inspiring. You have set a vision for yourself. You set a vision for your organization. The vision just, it doesn't stay there. You need to communicate again and again and again. And most of the times we forget to do that. We set a vision and it's done. And so the more you communicate, the more you inspire people. And that drives down to something which is completely opposite of it. Listen. Most leaders don't listen to people. We like to speak. We don't like to listen to people. So I think listening is an art which many leaders sometimes forget. We are not, with all due respect to the politicians, we are not standing on a stage giving a lecture for 1 hour. That's not our job. We are here to listen to people. And what I've observed is, in my experience, a lot of problems which your team sometimes faces are just resolved by listening to them. Many times your team member doesn't want your solution out of you. He has a problem. He just wants you to listen. This is my problem. This is what I had a challenge with one of my team members. He's not fighting with a team member. he had a challenge with a team member with a work. He speaks to you, and that itself comes out with solutions. So the more you listen, the more you inspire you.
Yes.
You don't need to give a solution to every problem that a person comes to you with. And then I think it boils down to empathy.
Yes.
And transparency.
Yes.
I think your team members, your in situations, in difficult situations, difficult times, basically need an empathy. They expect transparency from you. And I think that is where many leaders fail, where you're not being able to be as transparent as you need to be. You're not expected as a leader to say every thing in a balance sheet to everybody. I don't think anybody is expecting that as well. That's not transparency that a team expects. But a team needs to be sure that if there's something that's happening in my organization, I would know about it. I would be the one of the first persons to know about it. So I think if you're not able to do that, you're not going to be able to influence or lead a team. So once again, it boils down to we are dealing with humans. We are dealing with emotions. So different sets of people have different expectations. They have a different way of communication. You need to deal with them differently. And I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges that an individual has, that how do I do that? And I think, as I said, it's empathy, transparency, communication. Some of these things actually resolves most of the problems that you have in an organization. So, since you've already driven down your team to a common purpose, you add these factors to your leadership style, you are basically not going to have major challenges. And two more things, if I have to say, is consistency in your action. Many times you are inconsistent. You don't practice what you preach many times as a leader. You're not perceived as being fair. You have a team where you have one individual who's a non-performer. You have one individual who's a performer. A performer, you would really want to make sure that he is acknowledged, his performance is acknowledged. While you are motivating the person who's a non-performer, you also need to acknowledge a performer. Striking that right balance is so important for you. And I would say that's a challenge. And that's something that you need to overcome. And that comes with the more you listen and the more you communicate. And the last thing, if I were to say, is making sure that you develop your team. Now, development does not necessarily mean, now currently, let's say you're working with a small organization of 10 people, 15 people, 20 people. You don't have the budget to send a person to an IIM to go in for a developmental course. In a situation like that, basically it's development on the job. Many times you basically just give an additional responsibility to a team member and say, okay, here I think you're capable of doing it. I think you can do it independently. So give a job to a young person and say, I know you can do it. If you are having a trouble, just come to me. I'm here to help you. Give it to him. And I think that is what leads to a lot of confidence building, a lot of motivation in your team to really, really develop. So kind of summarizing it, be real, be a good listener, display empathy, bring in that transparency, bring in that fairness, and be consistent. Doing and practicing these things, I think, primarily drives your team much more than anything else as such, I would say.
I think superb. One thing that I really admire when I talk to people like you who come here, I think one of the very important thing that is talking to people like you is like reading a book. You don't have to open the book with thousands of pages. You talk to a person with wisdom and then you gain a lot. So I gained a lot without mixing any word or sugarcoating. I'm genuinely saying, so nice. I mean, so simply you brought out certain points. Listening, I think that is one of the most critical factors. Then consistency, then purpose, so many things. So a lot of people feel that the moment they become a leader, they have a designation. This is what they are striving for, Dane. And you said in the first part, it's not about your designations that you... A lot of people when they apply for a job, what is the designation? So how you really get into all these factors that you brought in, I think that's something, these are the challenges, and you also shared about the outcomes, how to overcome that. So Bimal, I know there is a lot to talk about this topic, but we are a little short of time, and we'll look forward to have some session with you in future with a new topic. So I would, and from my team, a big thank you to you for taking your time out on a working day, coming back from your office, and then setting up yourself to ensure that your audience who are listening to you right now, they are getting the wisdom. But one last thing that I would still say, that give one last message to the people who are listening. Any tip, anything that you feel that is a takeaway for them for this this show itself.
So I think so it's a very, very interesting topic, I would say. The most important thing for a leader is influencing, motivation. You cannot be a leader unless and until you're able to do that. Sometimes a leader has to be harsh. Sometimes a leader is not. And I think, while I don't want to kind of relate an army leader to a corporate world leader, but I remember reading this, what General Powell once had said. Leader is not someone who's there to please everybody. You may not be able to please everybody. So I think two things that an individual as a leader need to keep in mind: that you're not here to please everybody. At the same time, striking an extremely good balance of being an empathetic leader, and making sure that your actions have the human factor in it, has the empathy in it, and has the fairness in it. And it's not about you perceiving yourself as being fair or empathetic. It's about your team perceiving them. I think that is something that a good leader needs to really develop himself. And I don't see a reason why a leader cannot be successful if he has this.
Okay, thank you so very much once again for summing it up so nicely. And people who are watching this show right now, I know that you might have few questions in your mind running at this point of time, particularly young leaders, middle experienced leader as well. So I would request you that this live session would be posted on the LinkedIn channel on HCN Connect. You are free to post your questions. We are also going to put this on the YouTube. You can post your question, and I'll ensure that I'll personally hand it over those questions to Mr. Bimal to answer it at his convenience. And for sure, we're going to come back. So once again, thank you, Bimal, for making it up and sharing your wisdom over here.
Thank you so much, Arun, for having me. I think it's an honor to connect with you. I know you're an amazing coach and a mentor. So thank you. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. And a good night to everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.